The one thing, though, I will say is, at least to me at this point, based on what I saw in that conversation, that's inexcusable for Clayton right now is the fact that he did tell Susie, he was like, but I love you the most. Because let me just tell you, I cannot stress you how much I hate seasons in which the clear front runner, although I didn't know Susie was the front runner in his mind, I thought it was Rachel, but I digress. I hate seasons in which the clear front runner leaves of their own accord, and then the lead proceeds to stay and pursue the other one or two or however many people that are there. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Brianna's Bachelor Breakdown. I'm Brianna, your Bachelor Relationship Analyst. If you love getting into the nitty-gritty of the drama and unpacking all the relationships, then this channel is for you. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be covering the explosive Fantasy Suites episode from Clayton's season. So obviously we know that the meat of the drama and the topic of discussion happens at the end of the episode. But we still are going to touch on like what happened in the first 2/3 of the episode. So Rachel and Gabby both respectively have their dates first. They go on a volcano exploration activity, and also they go four-wheeling on a beach. And in the background we hear a lot of voiceovers from Clayton. He's telling himself, he's encouraging himself to be open and fully lean into all the relationships in an effort. I think his main reason for doing and thinking these things is he's like, okay, I know these girls are feeling a type of way about me. I know they're really deep in their feelings for me. And I'm worried that they're going to lose patience with me or lose interest in me if I don't reciprocate in some way and clue them into how I'm feeling. So I think this week he's really putting himself in the mindset of like, I'm just going to say what's on my heart in hopes of providing some solidifying reciprocation for these girls that I'm involved with. And then on the other hand, we have Susie giving a lot of voiceovers and a lot of interviews about how she's anxious about what the Fantasy Suites is going to bring for her, the information that she may or may not learn about the levels that Clayton has taken his other relationships to. And the whole time she's saying, you know, if he has slept with someone else and or if he is in love with someone else, I won't be able to move past that. But she does, I think, I will give her props, she does a good job of keeping herself grounded and kind of saying, hey, you know, like, I have all these fears, I'm really anxious about whatever I'm going to uncover at our Fantasy Suites date. But at the same time, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to try to stay neutral and not jump to conclusions before I have all the facts and all the information. So on his dates with Rachel and Gabby, Clayton does tell both of the girls that he is falling in love with them. But he only makes this admission. I think he goes into both of the dates knowing that he wants to say it and like being like, okay, if the moment feels right, like I'll tell them that this is what I have been feeling. But at the same time, he only makes this admission after both of the girls open up the conversation with expressing how they're feeling towards Clayton. Rachel, you know, she's talking about how she was feeling very anxious at the last rose ceremony and was feeling very insecure in where they stood in their relationship, especially because she got the last rose. And then Gabby, she was just kind of talking about how she feels like she can be herself around Clayton, how she's been kind of nervous the whole time to really let herself fall, but she feels like she's in a good place and she feels like Clayton really sees her. So for both of these girls, like I said, Clayton does, say that he's falling in love with both of these girls. They're both happy about it, and they both go on to forgo their separate rooms and spend the night together. So that's what happens. Okay, I think that's the fastest I've ever gotten through, like, however long, an hour and a half of television recap. So now let's talk about the last 30 or so minutes of how everything went down. So we have Miss Susie Q. She's going on her date, which does not look fun, by the way. This little sauna, hot, cold, jumping in and out of all these different bodies of water. not for me. And, you know, she does that. She goes through the emotions. Like, you can tell she's just ready to get to the night portion and have that conversation with him and get those answers that she's looking for. I will say, one thing that stuck out to me is Susie seemed like the only girl that Clayton went in head first, being like, I want to tell her I love her. I want to initiate that conversation with her so that she knows exactly how I feel. With the first two girls, it seemed more of like, you know, I want to see where they're at. I want to make sure they're still feeling good. And then if it feels right to me, I'm going to lean in and tell them I'm falling for them. With Susie, it was more like, I know how I feel about Susie and I'm ready to tell her tonight. So that's the mindset that Clayton is entering in, two very different mindsets. So they go into dinner, go into the conversation. Clayton, you know, says what he needs to say. And Susie, I think, because she was so focused on what she wanted to get out of that conversation, I think she had probably played it so many times in her head of like, okay, I'm going to ask him these questions. I'm going to get my answers. And then we'll go from there. That I don't think she, like, I think she already had the script written of, like, we're going to sit down, we're going to have this conversation, that she didn't also think about, like, oh, Clayton might have something he wants to get off his chest as well. So I think he said that, and she was like, oh, okay, cool, okay. But back to the script. So, you know, she takes in that information, and then she does ask him, are you falling in love with someone else, and or have you slept with anyone else? If so, it would be impossible for me to move forward. So let me just be clear. Let me be very clear. Because I feel like I might have some unpopular opinions throughout this whole thing, but I want to start it off and lay out where I stand on every facet of this whole situation. So first of all, I think that Susie's expectations, I think her boundaries, I think what she wants out of a relationship are valid. I think they're fine. I think they're appropriate. And I can totally understand where she's coming from. She is, at this point, was potentially about to get engaged in a week. And it is 1,000% understandable that you would not want the person that you're considering to be engaged to and married to for the rest of your life to have slept with 2 other people the week before, to have been in love with 2 other people the week before. Those feelings are not just very easy to turn off. And I can totally understand why that would make you feel as though the connection that you're sharing is not as special. And make you feel like, okay, well, what differentiates me from these other people if you're having these same feelings and sharing these same experiences? I totally get that. I totally respect it. 100% she has my support in her boundaries. And I'm going to get into this in a second, but the one question mark or like pushback I would like to provide for her is the fact that she did not communicate this boundary. But with that being said, she still has my support in the fact that she walked away, right? Like, she said, hey, you know what? This is my boundary. I don't feel good about this. I don't feel comfortable knowing that he has violated it. And with that information in mind, I now have to exit that relationship. I think she should have communicated it first. Like I said, I'll get to that in a second. But I do think that even so, that's not going to change the boundary, right? Like, that's not going to, like, it's not going to change the facts. Like, you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, for example, I know that, like, having access to your partner's phone or, like, going through your partner's phone is a very, like, controversial thing, or can be, in relationships. Some people are like, yeah, I totally should have all access to my partner's phone. I should be allowed to pick it up and go through it at any point in time. And other people are like, no, like, that's totally an invasion of my privacy. Like, my phone is my phone. Whether I have something to hide or not, like, that's my business. And so I feel like it's a case of, like, if that conversation had never been established, the two parties in the relationship had never discussed their feelings on that, and then partner A goes through partner B's phone, and they're like, I think this is fine. Like, I'm just checking up on my partner, and then partner B is like, whoa. Like, that's not okay with me. You're invading my privacy. But they never talked about it. It's still okay for partner B to have that boundary, right? Like, it doesn't change the fact that that boundary was still violated, whether or not it was discussed or not. And so if that to you is a deal breaker, like, you can walk away because you still feel violated in that moment, and there's nothing that partner A can go back and change in time. Like, you know, it's still on the table. So I say all that to say that I think Susie's thought process and the decision that she chose to make at the end of this whole situation is totally valid, and I 100% support it. But, like I said, I do think, and this is why I will give her that pushback, I do think that she should have communicated this beforehand. And I will say that I do think that Clayton has also the right to feel blindsided. I do think that he did say that. He was like, you dropped a bombshell on me. Like, I feel really blindsided. I didn't know where this is coming from. Like, this, that, and the third. And I also think just as Susie's feelings are valid, I also think that Clayton's emotions and feelings in that scenario are super valid. And I think that with her failing to communicate, like, a lot of people I saw online were saying, like, oh, Clayton's blaming her. Like, Clayton's saying that, like, her boundary ruined the relationship and all this stuff. But I didn't necessarily see it that way. I think that with the fact that she chose not to communicate this boundary with him, she took away the opportunity of choice. And he said it himself. He said, had you told me this beforehand, I could have gone into my fantasy suites week with this knowledge and made my decisions with this knowledge in mind. But since you did not provide me with this information, I was operating off of a lack of knowledge. And I therefore made decisions that I'm now facing consequences for because you did not provide that knowledge to me. And I think it is 100% fair for him to feel blindsided by that and for him to feel a little upset that the relationship, in a sense, is being taken away without him feeling like he has a say in it. That's not to say that she shouldn't take it away, but I think that it's valid for him to feel upset that he didn't get a say in it. He shouldn't get I'm not saying that he should get a say in her boundaries or that he should try to convince her to change her boundaries, but it is totally valid for him to feel like this relationship is being ripped away from me and I didn't realize, like, I feel like I didn't necessarily play a part in that because I didn't have the information when I made the decisions that I made, right? And I feel like a lot of people I saw online were also saying, like, oh, well, you know, Susie was saying a lot of, like, in her interviews, like, oh, my future husband, I shouldn't have to ask him to not have sex with other women. I should hope that he would want to care for our relationship like that, protect me in that way. And, like I said, that's all well and good. Like, if that's how she feels, that's how she feels. And, like, I respect it. But at the same time, I think a lot of people have this idea that your ideal partner, your future husband, your future wife, whatever, is you're going to meet them and they're automatically going to know. They're going to know how to read your soul, your mind. Like, they're going to know what your heart needs at different times. And that's not real. Like, that's not a reality. That's not how relationships work. Relationships function and thrive off of communication. Her future husband, I can agree, would not have slept with other people if that's what she wanted. But I think that it's unfair to hold him to a standard without telling him what that standard was. It's like you tell someone to, like, write an essay and you're like, here, write an essay, turn it in. And so they go off, I write an essay about flowers, but then you're over here telling me, oh, the essay is actually about soil. And now I'm being graded on this rubric that I didn't know existed. And had I known that that rubric was going to, like, exist, I would have talked more about soil in my entire essay about flowers. Does that make sense? Like, I'm going off on a tangent here. But I just think that the idea that your ideal partner will automatically just know what to do, what actions to take with you, like, that really just is not real. That just, like, does not happen in successful relationships. Successful relationships are built on a foundation of open and honest communication. And I think the mishap here is these two had such a strong relationship and they thought that they were on the same page. They really thought that they did have that foundation of the open and honest communication, and to find out that they were literally on different books, I think is what heightened the situation even more. Because at the beginning of the conversation, you know, both of them did acknowledge that Susie had been saying or encouraging Clayton to explore those other relationships, to, you know, explore all of his options, see what's going on with everyone else, and then if it is Susie at the end, come back and choose her. Like, she doesn't want to just be the default or be the settled option. Like, she wants to know that Clayton chose her because he wanted to choose her. I think the key question mark that was not defined between the two of them is what exploring the relationships with other people actually entails. And so Susie has one picture of her mind of just like, you know, go on dates, have conversations, see where your feelings are, do this, that, and the third. Whereas Clayton is like, I'm going to lean all in. I'm going to, if I'm falling in love, I'm going to say it. If I want to sleep with someone, I'm going to do it. Like, you know, like they have very different ways and interpretations of what it means to fully explore a relationship. And I don't think either is right. I don't think either is wrong. I think they're just very different. And I don't think that was established beforehand. And now they're butting heads over something that neither of them knew that the other person felt or thought. So then after we kind of had the initial like, okay, this is where we are. I didn't want you to have sex and be in love with other people, but you are, and you did. And they've kind of established the facts, laid everything out on the table. Then, you know, obviously the conversation progresses, the situation continues to escalate, and I did have mixed emotions about how the rest of the conversation was handled as well. I think that Susie I think she had mixed emotions. I think in her mind, she was like, okay, this is my boundary. I told myself this is what's going on. I know that I can't move past this, and this is where we are, and I have to stay true to myself. But at the same time, I still love this man. I had very strong feelings for this man. I thought I could marry this man. But at the same time, I have to walk away. And so I think she was grappling with all of that, juggling all those feelings, and just in general feeling very overwhelmed about how to navigate and how to conclude things in a way that respected herself, but also honored the relationship that she had with Clayton. So she was already in the process of like trying to move on respectfully, essentially. Whereas Clayton, I think that he saw it as an obstacle to work through. I think a lot of people I saw online were like, oh, well, he was trying to change her mind. He was trying to, you know, invalidate her boundary or whatever. I think that the way I read the situation is that it was the heat of the moment. Like I said, she was blindsided. She was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you had sex. I didn't know you were in love. Like, whoa, this is a lot. And I think he was also blindsided. I think he was like, whoa, like, I didn't know you had this boundary. Okay. And I think just stating it, I don't think he disrespected it, but I don't think that he also realized the gravity of it. I don't think he realized, like, this is, like, full stop, can't move forward, like, we're done, the end. I think he saw it as, like, this is a relationship problem. People have relationship problems. People have breakdowns in communication. Like, let's see if there's anything that we can do. Is there any way we can move forward from this? And I think he was very willing to try to work it out, try to move forward with it. And like I said, she had already started the process of moving on. And again, I don't think either approach is wrong. I think both people were just acting off of their emotions in that moment. And neither of them had the time to sit down and process and figure out the most respectful way to manage their own emotions as well as communicate effectively with the other person in the situation, in the conversation. So I think it was just a lot of emotions at that point, which leads me to my next point. I think the next emotion that we saw from Clayton was anger. Just pure, like, I'm upset, I'm mad, I'm shutting down. And I don't think it was anger. I think a lot of people read it as anger at the boundary, anger at Susie. Like, how could you do this? How could you tell me that I can't have sex with other people? I can't be in love with other people. Da, 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 da. Like, I think a lot of people, from my interpretation, took it as that. But to me, I took it as, like, he was angry, like I said, at feeling as though he had a lack of choice and feeling as though he didn't have the opportunity to make decisions based off of information that wasn't provided to him, number one. And also anger at the situation. Like, this is a girl he's in love with, and she's now walking away from him, and he did not see that coming. I think he's not mad at her for respecting herself. I think he's mad at, like, I'm losing you, and I didn't want to lose this relationship, and this really hurts. And usually the first response to feeling really hurt is anger. Like that's a natural human response. Anger happens. It's not good or bad. It's from a place of hurt. And you know, he wasn't courteous to her, walking her out. He was, I literally laughed out loud the way he was walking, like 15, like he could not walk any further ahead of her if he tried. Like he wanted to put as much distance between her and him as possible when he was walking her out. And, you know, he did say a lot of impulsive things. He did say, like, you're validating everything we've had. Like, I wish this hadn't happened. Like, da-da-da-da. And to me, it's like, I empathize with where he was coming from with that. Just because in that moment, you're like, I'm so hurt right now. What would make me not feel hurt? Oh, if this never happened, if this were a situation in which this never happened or I never met this person, I would not feel hurt. And I think that was the mindset that he was operating off of. I think he was just so hurt, and he was like, what solution, what scenario would happen in which I wouldn't feel hurt? And I think he was more so just saying that for himself. Of course, he was talking to her, so it came out like, it was rude to, like, it was rude to her. It was rude to say that. It was rude to kind of make her feel as though she has to take all the blame for the relationship. But at the same time, I think he was just in such, like, a fight or flight mode, and he was really trying to protect himself. And that brings me to my last point. Like, I think a lot of people were upset at the way he handled the situation. Like, he raised his voice, he shut down, he stormed off. Like, he did all this extra stuff. She was apologizing. Like, it was a very extra situation. It was extra. But I think at the same time, it was a fight. Like, they had a fight. They're two people. They're in a relationship. They're in love. They got in an argument. They had a breakdown in communication. They saw things differently, and they had an argument about it. And I think that fights are messy. Fights are raw. They're really tough, especially when you're in love with the person, especially when it's such a do or die situation. Like, this is do or die. Like, you get engaged or you don't. It's not like, oh, we take a break and then we date again. Like, no, like, you know, like, Neil Lane is coming or he's not. Like, it's do or die. And I feel like with, like, all those factors combined, just escalates the situation even more. And I know for me, I know for a fact that if I had to deal with all of those emotions, and then on top of that, most people don't have to fight on TV. Most people don't have to fight with a person that they're in love with, that they think they could marry on TV, and then have that fight evaluated by the masses. And I think we just saw something so raw and so real. And I think not only that, it is so jarring in contradiction to the way how overproduced this show already is. I always tell people, I watch a lot of reality TV, if you can't tell. I always tell people that The Bachelor is the classiest show that I watch. Like, it's so overproduced. They're flying to all these extravagant locations. They're having dinners in these, like, rooftop, like, you know, $1,000 room per night hotels. They do all these fun things, the helicopters, the doom buggies, like, whatever, you know, like, obviously, everyone here probably watches it. So, it's a very overproduced show. It's very, like, classy, and, like, we're going here, we're doing that, and, like, everything is, like, I love you, I'm feeling this way, like, you know, there's drama. And the drama usually comes from contestants versus contestants. I think it is. And I think that's why it's so jarring and so striking when we see that interpersonal drama between the contestant and the lead, especially when it's so raw and it's not something that it's like neither party had the opportunity to sit down, be like, okay, you know, this is a situation that's on the table. I'm going to go back. I'm going to think about it. Come back to you, and we're going to have a conversation. Like, I think that would have played out very differently. It was just like, here's the situation on the table. We're going to duke it out right now because, like I said, it's do or die. Either you're coming to this fantasy suite and our journey continues, or you're not. Like, there's no in between. And I think that just all those things combined, it's going to be messy. Like, it's going to be a tough situation to navigate. Clayton made mistakes. Susie, I don't think she made a mistake in the way she handled herself. I think she carried herself very well. I think she did make a mistake by not communicating to him beforehand. And then that led to the mistakes that Clayton made and how he carried himself. But like I said, like, that's what an argument is. That's what a fight is. And I think if you're that deeply in love with someone and you're in that, like, this is for a marriage. And I think it would be ridiculous to say that anyone can have a successful marriage without having some sort of fight. Like, without having some sort of raw emotion that really just, like, brings you there over the top. And then you sit down. If it's successful, if it's a successful marriage, you sit down, you process it, the next day you sleep on it, you work through it, and, you know, things are fine. But having a raw argument is not, in my opinion, the hallmark or an indicator that a relationship is bad or negative, or even that a person is bad or negative. I think it's just a hallmark of two people that really care about each other and are willing to express their relationships, express their emotions that deeply for each other. Because if they didn't care, if it wasn't a relationship that mattered to either of them, Susie would have said what she said, Clayton would have said what he said, and it would have been a dead issue. Like, if they weren't that invested in each other, this wouldn't have happened. They would have just moved on. So I really interpret Clayton's behavior, while it was messy, while it was reckless, I interpret it as hurt because he cares about her so much. And, you know, that's not to justify actual abusive relationships. That's not to justify, like, oh, you know, he hit you because he loved you. Like, no. I'm not an abuser apologist. But I don't think this situation was abusive. I think we just saw a fight. Like, point blank, I think that's what happened. And I don't think we're used to seeing that on this show. So, I will say, like I said, Susie, you know, she set her boundaries. She left. It is what it is. That's where we are. And I respect her for it. I'm also, Clayton, could he have done better? Probably. Am I going to hold that against him? Probably not. You know, it was what it was. They both were reacting off of emotion. They expressed their emotions differently. And here we are. The one thing, though, I will say is, at least to me at this point, based on what I saw in that conversation, that's inexcusable for Clayton right now, is the fact that he did tell Susie, he was like, but I love you the most. Because let me just tell you, I cannot stress you how much I hate seasons in which the clear front runner, although I didn't know Susie was the front runner in his mind, I thought it was Rachel, but I digress. I hate seasons in which the clear front runner leaves of their own accord, and then the lead proceeds to stay and pursue the other one or two or however many people that are there. I hate seasons where the second choice is chosen. I hate when people settle. Like, nothing enrages me more. Like, I saw a tweet or something where someone was like, normalize, like, ending the season early when you realize that you found your person. Like, I think that would spare people, the lead included, and especially the other 2, 3, 1, however many people are left. I think that would spare them a lot of hurt to know that they're just kind of being settled for, essentially. Like, that's not a good feeling. And what always blows me is that people in reality shows just say these things without seemingly connecting the dots that this is going to be rewatched later. So I'm not a spoilers person. I don't know what the outcome of this is. I don't know what happens. But if he does end up with Gabby or Rachel or whoever, they're going to watch this back and hear him say to Susie, I love you the most. And how do you think that's going to make them feel if they're in a relationship, if they're engaged to Clayton at the end of this? Like, that's not cute. That's really reckless. And I think if Susie meant that much to him, he should leave. He should cut it off. He should just, like, go home. Because nothing makes me more upset than watching the lead settle because their first choice left. Like, no one deserves that at all. So this was just one big rant. And I've pretty much got all my thoughts out. And thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you back here next week for another 2 episodes as we wrap up this hot mess express of a season.